Hello, everybody. Welcome to BeerSmith Podcast number 47. Got a great show for you today. Timely, we're going to do actually a beginning homebrewing show for people that are just beginning in homebrewing. And I think it's a great time to do this because we're just getting into the homebrewing season for 2012, 2013. Just got one announcement, which is we're very close to releasing our BeerSmith Lite app. I'm just waiting for final approval from the various app stores to get that out to you as soon as possible. And I think you're looking forward to that. It's the mobile app that's going to be available on Android, iPhone, iPad, and Android tablets. And now, without further ado, let's jump right into this week's episode. Today on the show, my guests are David Kidd and Nick Stephan, both from Midwest Supplies. David is the owner and CEO of Midwest Supplies, an avid brewer and winemaker, and is a member of the homebrew club, Motley Brew. Nick has been at Midwest since 2009 after graduating from the University of Minnesota. He is a customer service and marketing lead and runs Midwest's social media and Twitter and Facebook. Great to have you guys on the show.
Thanks for having us, Brad. We're excited to be here.
Absolutely.
Well, this is a show I've been wanting to do for a while, which is we're going to focus on how to get started brewing. Sort of a focus on beginners. And Nick, I'm going to throw out the first question to you. Let's start at the very beginning. What basic equipment do you need to get started in the home brewing hobby?
Well, really what it comes down to is you're going to need to get, you really need to start with a kit is really the best way to go about doing it. There's a lot of different options out there for kits. Midwest has a lot of different ways to go about doing it. But what I kind of recommend is going with a kit that's going to contain some basic fermenters. They're going to have at least a fermenting bucket. Usually it's a 6.5 gallon plastic bucket, a bottling bucket, as well as a carboy. Then you want your siphoning equipment, your kettle, your first ingredient package, and some bottles. Really after that, it's going to be just some cleaners and your bottle capper, and that's really going to get you kind of going. Getting going is pretty easy. It's down the road when you start adding on all the other items to it that you really start picking up all the bells and whistles and toys.
So a lot of people probably want to know. I mean, what does a bare bones basic kit start at roughly?
The bare bones kit, I think you can get into this for about $64 is what Midwest retails one for. After that, you need to pick up a kettle. You can pick that up from us, I think, for about $30, $35.
So kettle, we're talking how big is the pot?
Minimum of 4 gallons is what you're going to want to go with. 5 gallons is ideal, and even more if you have it, but a minimum of 4 gallons in capacity.
Mm-hmm. Well, David, can you walk us through the brewing process?
Yeah, and so I think, Brad, it's a pretty easy process, and a lot of people doing brewing for the first time can get a little bit intimidated. And we like to tell folks, if you can make soup, you can make good beer at home. And so I'd say relax, don't be intimidated, go through it. You can do it. I'd also warn people that if you're going to do it, you make sure you get your spouse's permission, because that's going to ultimately help you be a much more successful brewer. But to get started, you heat up your water. You generally want to have at least 2 to 3 gallons. As Nick mentioned, if you can have 5 gallons, it's even better, for assuming you're doing a 5-gallon extract kit. You heat your water up to about 55 degrees, and then you seep your grains. You put them in just like you put a tea bag in your tea, and you let it seep for about a half an hour or so. Once you've done that, you heat your water up to a boil. You add your extract, and you generally boil for about 60 minutes, putting hops in along the way, your bitter, your flavor, and your aroma hops. After an hour, you'll cool the wort below 80 degrees. Once it's below 80 degrees, you add your yeast.
What's the best way to do that? How do you cool it down?
Well, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but we think the best way is really to have a wort chiller. And that's a coiled tubing device that's made out of either copper or stainless steel. And you essentially run water from your faucet that's cool through your wort, and it cools the temperature pretty fast. You can use an ice bath. You can let it sit, but the challenges with those is that they take a long time. Mm-hmm. So once you add your yeast, you put it in your primary fermenter. You let it sit for about a week. If you have a secondary, you transfer it at that time, depending upon the recipe. and how long you're going to let it ferment. You let it sit for another week or so. So it could be as early as 2 weeks you're done with your fermentation. If you're bottling, you bottle it, and you'll be ready to drink it about another 2 weeks. So you could be drinking your beer in about a month or so.
So how much time are you looking at, say on brew day? How long does it take? You start out on the stovetop, you're boiling your wort. How long does that process take?
Well, the brew process itself takes about 2.5 hours. I'd probably throw in another 15 minutes or half an hour at either end to do the preparation as well as the cleanup. Mm-hmm. And you want to block off, I'd say, a good 3.5 hours to get everything done right in terms of all the cleaning.
So cleanup is really important. Can you talk a little bit about how important cleanliness is when you're brewing beer?
It's one of the key things, and I'd say you got to make sure you both clean and sanitize your equipment. If you introduce any sort of external bacteria into the wort once it's cooled, it's boiling, it doesn't matter because the boil will kill any bacteria. But if you introduce anything into your wort, once you've cooled it, that could interfere with the fermentation and ultimately really affect the flavor of your beer. So cleaning as well as sanitation are critical to making good tasting beer. Absolutely.
Nick, can you tell us what kind of a batch you'd recommend for a first-time brewer and why?
Generally I would say anything with any kind of ale is where I would go with it. I really recommend for people to stay away from lagers the first time around. We get a lot of people asking, I really like, one of my favorite questions, I really like Budweiser, I really like Miller. It's kind of one of those funny questions. Yeah, exactly. How do I make that? And, I tell people honestly, that is as much as those of us in the craft brew world tend to disparage some of the
popular beers.
Exactly. They are actually very, very difficult to make. And that is because there's such a clean fermenting beer that any imperfection whatsoever in the brewing process is really going to throw it off. So I really recommend for people, start with something, that's going to be a really robust, full-flavored beer. Ales are obviously going to be your best bet. I would say... if you like stouts, that's a great place to start. I think my first batch was a stout, and it turned out fantastic. I think I went a little bit lighter the next time around, and it wasn't as good. There were a lot more off flavors coming through there. But yeah, stouts, red ales, IPAs are another great one, just because there is so much hop flavor coming through that it really can save you if you have any imperfections in the brewing process.
Hey, can you tell us we didn't cover it really yet, so can you tell us a little bit what a typical extract kit looks like? What does it contain? You're going to order your basic equipment, but then you actually have to go order a kit for ingredients as well, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So, your basic ingredient kit, getting it from us is going to include really mainly you're going to open it up. There's going to be a big jug. It looks like a half-gallon milk jug, and you're going to say, "What is this?" Well, that's malt extract. It's someone basically did the all grain process for you. They took the malt and they steeped it. They took all the sugars out, and then they condensed it down into this syrup form. So this is now your malt sugar essentially. So that's going to be in a half-gallon milk-looking container. And then in addition to that, you're going to have some specialty grains in there. Those are going to really provide your flavor and your aroma to all your beers. Really kind of the way I look at it is the malt extract is kind of your canvas, your blank slate, and then your specialty grains are going to be your paint. That's really what's going to give your beer the complexity and the flavor that you're looking for. That's really what's going to change beer to beer when you're doing extract. Then you're going to have your hops, various additions along the way. Usually they're going to be in pelletized form. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you will see them in leaf form. It's especially common if there's any dry hopping involved, that kind of thing. And then priming sugar and probably a muslin bag, a little cheesecloth looking bag that you put the specialty grains in for the steep. First step. And then that's pretty much about what comes in one of those kits. They're pretty straightforward starting off.
Well, David, I was hoping you could walk us through the steeping process itself. Because most people, they may make their first batch with just a can of extract or something like that, but ultimately to get the flavors you want, you really have to jump into steeping grains. And,
no, that's
go ahead.
That's exactly right, Brad. And we really recommend that people get kits that have specialty grains in them because it produces a better product and it adds to the flavor, the aroma, and it's an important part of brewing beer.
Mm-hmm.
You introduce the muslin bag, which is like a long sock. It allows you to put all of your grains into the bag, and you put it into water that's about 155 degrees. I should add, before you do that, you want to make sure you've cracked your grains.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to get you want to make sure your grains are cracked, because that helps with the seeping process. You put it in your water at 155 degrees, and essentially you let it sit. I'll occasionally take a spoon or what have you and kind of squeeze some of the juices out, especially at the end. But it's a fairly easy process, and ultimately it's something, especially for newer brewers, is going to really help add to the flavor and the quality of the beer that you make.
So you said 155 degrees for how long? About 20,
about a
30
half an hour.
Half an hour.
About a half an hour. And I'd say, that's one of the things that can be a little bit trickier. And if you're doing it on a stove, it's a little bit easier to maintain that temperature control.
Mm-hmm.
As you start to move outside or into a garage, if you use a burner, depending upon the type of burner, it can be a little bit tricky to maintain that temperature at 155. You can either shoot up a little bit too high or sometimes miss it. And so trying to be around that 55 area is generally good enough.
And you buy the grains either crushed or you mentioned cracked. How do you go about cracking grains?
Well, it's a very good question. So we, of course, offer all of our customers the option, if they buy grains from us, we can either ship them uncracked or cracked. So we provide that, and I think a lot of local homebrew shops provide crushers on site. If you'd like to crack them yourselves, you can either buy a mill, or you can even use something as simple as a rolling pin or even a beer bottle to crush your grains. If we crush them for you, or if you have it done at your local homebrew shop, you'll probably get a better crush, which results in a better seeping process. But you just want to make sure you crack them.
Mm-hmm. So that's the basic process. Nick, I was going to ask you next. How do you make the leap now from extract brewing, a kit, something that you buy from the store or whatever, into actually designing your own extract recipes? How do you make that? That's usually the next step in brewing.
Buy a book. Do
you have any good book recommendations?
I do, absolutely. Obviously, I'm a big fan of Palmer. How to Brew, I think, was probably what really taught me what I was doing. When I opened that book, I think the first time I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah, John Palmer was on the podcast last week, actually.
Fantastic guy. He really knows his stuff, and he really breaks it down in a really in a manner that's easy to understand, and it's a great step-by-step guide. I do recommend that book. Also, Jamil Zanishev, the design or Brewing Classic Styles, is another great one that I do recommend. But really, what it comes down to is go to your local homebrew shop, whether that's here at Midwest or whoever happens to be your local homebrew supplier, and go to the grain room. Really, what it comes down to with designing your own beer, as I said, is really going to be playing with specialty grains. Go to the grain room and just start, get the permission first, but try and pick up little samples, little 1 ounce samples of the grains, and start tasting them. Toss them right in your mouth and chew on them, and you can really get some interesting characteristics and figure out what each grain is bringing to the beer. After you've done some reading and you kind of figure out what's going on there, that I think is the best way to kind of get an idea of what's going to happen with your beer, and really design a good one. The other thing is, look what the pros have done. Look what other people have done. Start looking at, there's a ton of really good places out there that you can find other recipes, whether that be the forums or whether that be getting BeerSmith. Obviously, is a great place to be able to mess with your recipes.
I've got a recipe site, BeerSmithRecipes.com now, which has, I think, over 3,000 recipes available now. So
yeah, and look at what those people have done, and modified a little bit. Hey, this person did 2 ounces of chocolate malt and 4 ounces of roasted barley for their stout, but I kind of want a little bit less intensity on the roasted barley, maybe a little more. And just kind of play with it. I think you're really going to start to see. Batch to batch, you'll start to understand what that is, and you're going to have some flops. I know I've had some. I made a smoke beer one time that wasn't even palatable.
I think I drank one of those one time.
Yeah, so you're going to have flops, and that's just something that you kind of have to come to grips with as a brewer, that when you're learning, some things are going to fail. And they're going to be beers that you drink by yourself when you don't have people over, just to get rid of them and empty the bottles. But be brave and experiment and look what others have done. And that's really the best way to kind of start start brewing your own recipes.
Well, while we're on this topic, I thought maybe just talk for a moment about beer styles and what a beer style is, how that kind of comes into play.
Sure. Beer styles, I mean, obviously there's the BJCP guidelines, which are going to be, 23? I can't remember. It's 22 or 23.
BJCP.org is where you can find those.
Yep, and you can kind of see what's been laid down, the ground rules for all the different styles out there. And I mean, they'll be categorized from, light American lagers all the way to porters. And then there's going to be subsets of each one of those beers. It's a good thing to just start reading those and kind of getting an idea for what's out there. The number one thing I recommend to people is a read. Just read. Call us, ask us questions if you don't understand something. But it really is all about just researching and finding as much information as you can. It's all out there. There's a lot of great resources. Just start doing the research.
Good. Well, thank you. Mm-hmm. Well, now that we're through some of the basics, I thought we'd jump into some of the top questions you get from homebrewers, and so I wrote down some of the questions you provided me in no particular order. But David, could you start us with, do you need a wort chiller? Is one question you get quite a bit, and stainless, copper, does it matter? I was wondering if you could talk to that one.
No, it's a great question, Brad, and so I don't know if I would say you need to have a wort chiller, but they're very, very, very helpful to have. And I'd say beyond the kind of basic kit, we often recommend that people get a carboy if it doesn't come with it, a siphon if you don't get one of those, a good kettle, a thermometer, and kind of the final thing is a wort chiller. Mm-hmm. And the wort chiller really helps at the end of the process. At a minimum, it's a great time saver. Mm-hmm. If you put your wort, and you got to imagine, you've been boiling your water now for an hour, so it's pretty darn hot. And the purpose is you want to get that wort down below 80 degrees as quickly as possible so you can introduce the yeast, start that fermentation. And you could use an ice bath, but even that alone, if you do it really well, it takes 45 minutes.
Right.
In the past, I've just put a kettle out in the snowbanks here in Minnesota, and you can imagine it gets quite cold here in Minnesota, Brad. That still took a little over an hour. It just takes a long time to cool the wort. So the wort chillers, what they are, as I've described, is they're just cylindrical tubing of stainless steel or copper. You immerse it in your hot wort. You add water right out of a fountain or out of a garden hose into that wort chiller, and that by cycling through your wort will take the temperature down quite quickly in about 15 minutes or so. We sell a variety of sizes and shapes, and I think there's a couple of basic things to understand. The bigger the tubes, or I guess the more surface area you get, the more exposure you get from the cool water that's coming through mm-hmm. the tubes into the wort, the faster the temperature will cool.
And what are some of the advantages of doing it quickly? Just can you walk us through those real quick?
Well, one, there's the time, but two, you really got to think about once you take the wort off of the heat and you stop the boiling water, that introduces a time for exposure to bacteria and other things that can interfere. So you really want to minimize that exposure time before you can put it away in your fermenter and really start that process going. So those are kind of the big advantages I see of having that wort chiller.
Can you talk to maybe a cold break as well?
Nick, do you want to? Brad, I guess I'm not sure.
Or hot break, cold break, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, well, with cold break, I mean, the faster you can chill it down, the clear, the more solids you're going to pull out of the beer. And if you don't get it chilled down really quick, you're not going to get that cold break, and you're going to end up with what a lot of people refer to as chill haze. So your beer is sparkling clear in the bottle, looks amazing. Put it in the fridge. Pull it out. This is not at all what I had before. It's now it's all cloudy and weird. So, and getting a really good chill, a really fast, rapid chill, will help alleviate that problem.
Right. So I mean that's another big advantage.
Yeah. So in one of the things you'd asked before about the difference in materials, generally you find copper, and on occasion you'll find stainless steel wort chillers. We happen to sell both. Copper conducts heat a little bit better, so it's easier for the temperature to cool down a little bit faster. The downside of copper is that it can tarnish as well. So over time, your copper can tarnish. Believe it or not, copper can be actually a little bit of a yeast nutrient, but I wouldn't sway people to pick a copper wort chiller because of that. So that's kind of the big trade-off between copper and stainless steel. Stainless steel might have a little bit more longevity, but copper ultimately helps cool the wort a little bit better.
I mean, usually stainless is more expensive, right?
Actually, stainless is a little bit cheaper here in Midwest, so that's a little bit of a benefit on the stainless side.
Okay, I'm going to switch over to Nick real quick. Can you, let's see, another question here. Do you need to move to a large kettle to do full volume boils? Is that an important factor when you're trying to make better beer?
I think it is. That's one of the things, along with the wort chiller, I tell people the next step is pick up a nice kettle. And I mean, if you have a starting kettle already, say you have a 4-gallon or a 5-gallon kettle already, keep that one. Throw that in your closet and keep it there. I mean, if you ever move to all grain, it's going to be a great thing for heating up your strike water, your sparge water. So hold on to that. That kettle is not gone to waste. It is not. It is not a dead item.
But when we talk about a full volume for, say, a 5-gallon batch, how big a kettle are we talking about here?
I would recommend at least 8 gallons if you can. You're going to want to boil about 6.5 gallons, 6.2 gallons, I think is what it comes down to boil down to hit your 5-gallon mark, because you're going to lose about a gallon, 1.2 gallons during your 60-minute boil. So I usually recommend an 8-gallon. In all honesty, if you can, go with the 10. It's just a better bet. It's going to give you less of a chance of boil over, and anyone who's ever had a boil over knows they're an absolutely miserable experience.
I don't know too many brewers that haven't had boilovers at some point.
So, spend the extra $20-$30, get a 10-gallon kettle, get a nice one, so that down the road, if you want to, you can punch it. You can put you can put a ball valve in there, and it's going to help you down the road if you want to get into all grain. All the stuff's expandable. And
of course, when you get a bigger pot, it doesn't fit on the stove anymore, right?
You get a bigger pot, it doesn't fit on the stove anymore, and now you want to get a hurricane burner, and then you want to go, and then you're getting kicked out of the house, and you got to go into the garage, and so on and so forth. And this is when things start just cascading.
Which usually makes your partner happy, but yeah, but I mean, really, it's a consideration. If you get a 10-gallon pot, it really isn't going to work on the stove anymore. You really do need a propane burner of some kind, right?
Correct. Yeah, you do want to go with a burner. The Hurricane burner, the Bayou Classic, those are the ones that I've got 2. I love them. I think they're great. I will say from experience that you can pull off a 10-gallon pot on your stove at home, putting it over burners.
2 burners, yeah.
I'll say it's not a good idea.
It takes a long time to boil. I've done that too.
It takes a long time, and you end up scorching the heck out of the top of your counter of your stove. I lost a lot of security deposit on one of my first apartments, right? So I don't recommend it. It can be done in a pinch if you need it to be. No, a burner is the way to go about doing it, and then going outside. But I really do recommend the full volume boil. You're going to get better hop utilization, more bitterness, more flavor from less hops. So that's always a bonus. Less chance of scorching is another big one. When you're doing those really concentrated boils, you got to remember that's a really thick sugar solution.
Right.
And if you've ever noticed, I'm sure new brewers have seen when they've poured their wort out of their kettle after the boil, there's kind of a little brown layer on the bottom there. Well, that's caramelization. That's not a good thing. It's not terrible, but it's not something you're really looking for. It's going to affect the flavor, the color, as well as the fermentability of your beer.
Makes it a little darker, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's, especially if you're going for a lighter style, you really want to stay away from that. As well as, there's no need to top up with cool water then at the end is the other really nice aspect. No chance to introduce bacteria from a tap faucet, something like that. Everything's been boiled. You're going into a sanitized fermenter. It's just a better all-around operation.
Excellent. Well, David, over to you.
Yeah.
What are the advantages or disadvantages of liquid yeast and yeast cultures? This is a great question, I think, too.
Yeah, it is. And, first thing, Brad, I would say is that, dry yeast can do a great job and make very good beer. And all of our kits come with a base level dry yeast package. Oftentimes that's a Mutton's yeast. And I tell people getting into it, while you may see a lot of people that are brewing for a long time upgrade to one of the liquid yeasts, the White Labs or the Y yeast, the dry yeast will do a very good job.
Yeah, it's improved a lot over the years. I know when I started brewing, it was essentially bread yeast in a package. That's what they sent out. But I mean, it's gotten a lot better. Even the dry yeast quality has gotten much better.
No, that's exactly right. And we see guys that come into the shop and they may have tried brewing in the 90s, and so they've got this different idea of what yeast is about. And so brewers yeast and what it is today has really changed. And The fermentus products, the fermentus yeast actually do a fantastic job. We often upgrade people and kind of call it more of a premium dry yeast. I like the US-05. That's a nice yeast, pretty flavor neutral, does a very good fermentation. And so I would tell folks, liquid is good, and there's some advantages of that, but the dry yeast will do a very good job and make good beer. Liquid yeast does give you greater variety. Some of the strains aren't always found, or you can't always replicate some of the flavors with the dry yeast alone, and so that's definitely one of the advantages.
So there's a lot more varieties of yeast available, right? There's dozens
exactly
of them,
right.
I think, yeah.
There's, you look at our coolers and you look at the options available in the liquid form versus the dry, it's not even close. So you've got a lot more flavor profiles and just options and experimentation you can do with the liquid yeasts.
And one of the other issues that comes into play is starters. Now, my understanding is with the dry yeast, you don't really need a starter, right?
Yeah, the dry yeast, you really don't. And it depends on which type of liquid yeast you're going to use if you want to do a starter or not as well. I mean, some of the Y yeasts with their smack pack configuration, you want to make sure you sanitize the outside of the package, and that's sometimes something that newer brewers will overlook. But you can smack it, you let it go, and you pitch it right away. With the white labs, you might want to do more of a starter, although some people will just shake up the white labs and pitch that as well. I think down the line, as you get a little bit more serious into brewing, you want to try doing yeast starters. If you're a newer brewer, though, that might be one of the advantages where you can use the dry yeast and it's not that complicated.
Well, Nick, jumping over to you, another common question: do I need to control the temperature of my fermentation? And if so, how do I do that?
As with brewing, you can make beer any which way you want to. You do not have to control the temperature of your fermentation, but it is a good idea. Trying to keep yourself within those the confines of what that yeast profile wants to ferment at is really gonna help you out with ester formation, as well as fusel alcohols, things like this that can form once you start getting a little bit higher, as well as if you get too cold. I mean, then your yeast is just going to stop and you're going to end up with an under attenuated beer. So fermentation control is important, at least even if you're a new brewer and even if you don't have the capability, you're limited to your apartment, at least keep an eye on it. Wrap blankets around it if necessary, or you can do a swamp cooler to try and cool it down if it is starting to get too hot.
I've seen some people will wrap wet towels around it. It drops the temperature a few degrees if your apartment's a little warm, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, with the swamp cooler, what I was referring to is some people take like a Rubbermaid tote, put your carboy in there, wrap towels around it, and it'll drop it a few degrees. And if you need to go even further, you can direct a fan at it, and that'll help draw some of the heat off it as well.
And that works for ales, right? But lagers are still a different beast here, right?
Correct, absolutely. With lagers, I tell a lot of people, they'll call and they'll want to know, hey, I really want to try my first lager. And the first thing I say is, do you have a temperature-controlled environment? If you don't have an extra refrigerator or a deep freezer that you've converted with, one of the temperature controllers, it's just not a good idea. You really need to have an environment that you can hold at 55 degrees, and then again at as close to freezing as you can get for as long as you can. So you really do need to have a temperature control.
So an ale, you're typically fermenting at what?
68 degrees is what I usually shoot for.
Yeah, just a little below room temperature. But the lagers need to be down at?
Well, you're going to start them at about the same until they get rolling, and then I usually lower it down to 55 for primary fermentation, right. And then I'll go down, when I hit my lagering stage, it's going to be somewhere around 30, 34, 33, if you can get it there. Ideally, realistically, you're probably
you really need a dedicated fridge or old freezer or something like that to make a good lager.
And that's what I did. I took an old freezer that I found on Craigslist and got one of the Johnson thermal controllers, hooked that up on there, got a stopper thermal well, which are great because you're actually taking an accurate reading from the core of your fermenter, not from the side or not the ambient temperature. And they're really nice because then it'll, you can get a really accurate fermentation temperature. I really, temperature control is one of those things that's overlooked in the beginning that I think is very important for people. You're really going to end up with a better product in the long run if you can control your temperature.
Good. Well, back to David. Next question is, should I add all of my malt extract at once? And, does a late extract addition, which is adding that extract later in the boil, does that help?
Well, it can, especially if you're boiling less than 5 gallons, less than 6 gallons. So if you've got a kettle, if you got a 4-gallon kettle and you're boiling just 2 or 3 gallons, doing a late extract addition can help quite a bit.
And what does it do for you? What does this late extract help do?
Well, one of the things it can help you with, Brad, is it can help avoid scorching. When you add your extract to the pot, you really want to make sure you don't have any on the bottom that the heat burns and boils up. Because adding the extract, we have a couple of cases all the time where folks that are new to it will pour in their extract, not stir it up thoroughly enough, just let it sit at the bottom of the pot, and it scorches the extract and kills the beer. I mean, that's an easy way to really make bad beer. So by adding some of it over time or spreading it out, especially towards the end of the boil, when you have fewer gallons going, you can help avoid that. You can help when it helps a little bit with hop utilization as well. So that's something, more the alpha acid is going to be ultimately absorbed into the beer if you're doing it a late extract addition. And that ultimately produces more hoppy flavor, aroma, bitterness. So there's some advantages for the flavor of the beer. I generally, when I'm brewing an extract kit, and if I'll brew an 8-gallon kettle, get a full 6 gallons going in there. I'll put it in all at once. But a lot of the guys that are in my homebrew club will do as little as 2 gallons, and so a late extract addition really helps them.
Good. Well, Nick, what about clarifying agents? Do you actually need to use them, and which one should I choose? There's a lot of different clarifying agents that you can add, obviously at the end of the fermentation, that help to make your beer clearer. What do they do for you?
Well, clarifiers are one of those things that it's going to be a matter of personal preference. What I really do is, if I want a clarifier, I use Irish moss. It's essentially a seaweed is really what it comes down to, but that is what I add. Last 15 minutes to boil. It's easy, gives you a little bit clearer beer. It's the way I like to go with it. With a lot of styles, clear beer isn't necessarily even required. I mean, if you're going to make a wheat or something like that, you don't even want a clear beer. So it's really going to be a matter of determining which beer you're going to be making, what you want, and really recognizing that from the beginning before you start adding clarifiers. So you're kind of your options out there. You're going to have Irish moss, isinglass, and biofine. Isinglass is going to be, it's actually made from sturgeon bladder, more or less. And so some people might be turned off by that idea, so they don't necessarily want to use the biofine as kind of your vegan-friendly option.
Sounds better than seaweed, I don't know.
I love sushi. I don't know about anybody else, but, so I guess, I'm not totally turned off by seaweed. But no, biofine is basically the same function as isinglass, and that'll be added. You can add that after fermentation is complete. Biofine and isinglass can be added after fermentation is complete. So that's your option. If you have a beer that's just not clearing, you can add either of those two agents in the secondary to help clear out. And then Irish moss is kind of a preemptive measure that I'll use in any beer that I want to have a little bit clearer product on. And that's, like I said, it's a matter of personal preference. And, honestly, I found if you're kegging or if you're, doing something like that, if you do a cold crash and let them sit for a week in the kegerator, and you pour off your first couple of pints, you're going to have most of your yeast sediment in there, and the rest of your keg's going to be perfectly clear. So it's not always something you need to use, but if you are having problems with clarity, then these are some good options for you.
Well, thanks. And back to David. Let's see. Next question is, when I do want to move from extract, should I jump up to partial mash, or is it best to jump right into all grain?
Well,
so, Brad, typically, we've been talking the whole show about extract brewing, and so maybe talk a little bit about some of the other options.
Yeah, and this is a question that Nick and I get all the time, and there's really no right answer. It's a personal decision. The partial mash is a little bit of a safety net, and typically you find if people take this intermediate step, they might do it 2, 3, or 4 times, and then they go ahead and make the final move, and they jump all the way into all grain brewing. I think the advantages of doing the partial mash is it might be a little bit less expensive, or at least allows you to spread out some of the investment that you need to make into a full all grain setup. You're still going to get some extract involved in that, and to account for some of your gravity points. And it really just allows you, I think, to sort of ease into or start to get comfortable with the all grain process. The flip side, or sort of why we, depending upon the person, why we might encourage someone to make the jump all all at once is you kind of make the investment. You know what it is. You get all the equipment and you're done.
Right.
And we find, as I mentioned earlier, most people, it is partial mash is an intermediate step to get them all the way to all grain. It's pretty easy to get into all grain. Your 10 gallon cooler, your 10 gallon kettle. It's actually a lot of fun. You do a lot more development in your own recipes, and it really does feel like it's more your own as opposed to taking a recipe off the web or taking a kit that we might pre-make for you. So there's a lot more personalization into it, and I guess I would say too, it's actually a lot easier than most people think as well.
Yeah,
so
it takes a little extra time because you're going through this extra process called the mash, which maybe you could just in a minute or two just walk us through what a mash looks like, but it gives you a lot more flexibility in terms of creating different kinds of beer too.
It does, and ultimately it produces a little bit better beer. So I would say it's a big decision. As Nick mentioned before, I would really encourage people to read up on it. Visit their local homebrew shop. Give us a call on the phone. Come into the store if you live in Minnesota. We'll help walk you through this because it is a personal decision, and part of it's going to depend on the investment, how much time you have to put into it, and ultimately what you're trying to get out of the beer that you make.
Well, David, while I got you on the line here, I was wondering if you just maybe talk for a minute here at the end about Midwest Brewing.
Sure, absolutely. So, Brad, as you know, Midwest Supplies has been around since 1995. We're one of the largest home brewing and winemaking shops in the country and the world. We like to pride ourselves in having the greatest selection of home brewing and winemaking products out there. So generally, if we can't find it with us, you're not going to find it out there. And we strive to keep our prices at the lowest point in the industry. A couple things I think that we have going on that I'd love to talk to your viewers about is we just introduced and launched a loyalty program last week. So we encourage folks, they get benefits and rewards every time they buy from us, and we appreciate the loyalty we've seen from our customers, and we want to sort of reward them back for continuing to be customers for us. And I guess the other big event we have coming up here is John Blickman's coming up on Saturday, and I guess 2 weeks, and he'll be brewing with us out in the parking lot.
Yeah, I've had John on the show. He's great.
John is something else, and he makes some great products that we're proud to sell. And so he's going to be out brewing with us here, and we're going to have a bunch of people come in and do that on Saturday the 20th. So we like to have a lot of consistent events, and we have different home brewing clubs coming in. And to us, it's all about community and getting people involved, and we find that's a good way to do it. And the final thing I'll mention, Brad, and a lot of your viewers may not realize this, is that we actually have people staffed on the phones like Nick 7 days a week to answer questions or emails or phone calls that people may have about the brewing process. So that's a service that we like to offer to our customers so that if they have any questions about how to make better beer or even better wine, we have people that are available Saturday morning when they're starting the brew or Wednesday evening after they received after they see their products from us.
That's great. Well, thank you. Well, I wanted to just open it up to both of you if there's anything else you'd like to add about beginning brewing or maybe any points that we may have missed.
I guess I would just say, a lot of people are intimidated by the brewing process and really just scared about it in general or really nervous, I guess. And really what it comes down to is just make the first batch. Don't worry about it. Don't think too much about it. Just don't worry, relax, and have a home brew. Just fire off your first batch. It might not be the best beer you've ever made, but you're going to learn a ton from that process. And, if you have questions, as David mentioned, we're here to help. There's a ton of people out there on any of the forums that are also willing to help, but really just jump in, and all of it will begin to become apparent after you get that first batch under your belt.
And David, your thoughts?
Brad, the only thing I'll add is I know some people are a little bit put off, or they've heard sometimes the smell that is produced by the making beer isn't the best, but I'll tell you what, I actually love that smell. I love the smell of hops, and I think it's a really fun part of the day. And I would say involve your friends and your neighbors and your family. A brew day is a lot of fun. It's you can certainly do it by yourself, but you're going to share your beer with your friends, and I would encourage you to get other people to do it with you. It's a great activity to do with your friends and family.
I love the smell of hops in the morning. Huh? Well, thank you both for being on the show. It's really been a great honor. And like I said, I've been wanting to do this for quite a while. I wanted to really just do a show that could focus on beginners. And so I really appreciate you both being here.
Absolutely.
Good chatting with you.
So again, my guests, David Kidd and Nick Stephan from Midwest Supplies. David's the owner and CEO of Midwest Supplies. And I should mention their website, and it's at midwestsupplies.com. And Nick has been at Midwest since 2009 and is their customer service and marketing lead. Well, a big thank you to David Kidd and Nick Stephan for appearing on the show. They did a great job for new homebrewers. Hopefully you can recommend this show to some of your friends who are just getting started homebrewing. Just a couple reminders. Our newsletter is at beersmith.com. Just click on the newsletter link on the right side, and we'll send you an article on homebrewing every week. The newsletter's up over 20,000 people now, so very popular. So if you're not signed up, recommend you do that. And again, our mobile app coming out soon. I'd like to thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great brewing week.